Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about creating unity in the midst of diversity. And we'll be exploring the story of Naaman and the relationship of people with extremely different religious beliefs and practices. When I was growing up, the church my family attended did not believe in infant baptism, but it had no problem in allowing elementary-aged school children to be baptized if they made a mature profession of faith before the congregation. And if they believed that, and that the church believed that such a decision automatically granted that person or that child acceptance into God's kingdom. Nowhere was it considered that peer pressure, parental influence, or excessive encouragement of a minister could compromise such a decision. It was also imperative that baptism by immersion would follow the decision. And if a person from another Christian denomination asked to join the church, the requirement of immersion was enforced also. It would have been almost impossible for a person of another race or another faith to even be allowed to attend the worship service. I'm sure that there are some churches today that still adhere to those similar practices. If we look at John Wesley's religious evolution, we see that he originally viewed indigenous people and members of other religions as being naive or ignorant. Later, he characterized them as natural man. After encountering people from various faiths and after some scholarly probes of other religions, Wesley began to encourage his followers to cease from being stumbling blocks to Muslims and people of other faiths. He realized that respecting them and treating them with kindness would truly reflect the grace of God and could offer spiritual hope for humanity. Often in the Old Testament, we find references to the emphasis of the separation of the children of Israel from people and nations who do not worship God. Today's lesson, however, focuses on a situation and a group of people who experience positive results by interacting with one another and allowing God's presence to be felt in a powerful way. I'm going to read 2 Kings 5, verses 1 through 19. Naaman, a general for the king of Aram, was a great man and highly regarded by his master, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. This man was a mighty warrior, but he had a skin disease. Now Aramean raiding parties had gone out and captured a young girl from the land of Israel. She served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "I wish that my master could come before the prophet who lives in Samaria. He could cure him of his skin disease." So Naaman went and told his master what the young girl from the land of Israel had said. Aram's king then said, "Naaman, go ahead. I will send a letter to Israel's king." So Naaman left. He took along 10 kikars of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. He brought the letter to Israel's king. It read, "Along with this letter, I'm sending you my servant Naaman, so you can cure him of his skin disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he ripped his clothes. He said, "What? Am I God to hand out death and life? But this king writes me asking me to cure someone of a skin disease. You must realize he wants to start a fight with me." When Elisha the man of God, heard that Israel's king had ripped his clothes, he sent word to the king, "Why did you rip your clothes? Let the man come to me. Then he'll know that there's a prophet in Israel." Naaman arrived with his horses and chariots. He stopped at the door of Elijah's house. Elijah sent out a messenger who said, "Go and wash 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and become clean." But Naaman went away in anger. He said, "I thought for sure that he had come out, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the bad spot and cure the skin disease. Aren't the rivers in Damascus, the Abana and the Pharpar better than all Israel's waters? Couldn't I wash in them and get clean?" So he turned away and proceeded to leave in anger. Naaman's servants came up to him and spoke to him, "Our father, if the prophet had told you to do something difficult, wouldn't you have done it? All he said to you was, 'Wash and become clean.'" So Naaman went down and bathed in the Jordan 7 times, just as the man of God had said. His skin was restored like that of a young boy, and he became clean. He returned to the man of God with all his attendants. He came and stood before Elisha, saying, "Now I know for certain that there's no God anywhere on earth except in Israel. Please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha said, "I swear by the life of the Lord I serve that I won't accept anything." Naaman urged Elijah to accept something, but he still refused. Then Naaman said, "If not, then let me, your servant, have 2 mule loads of earth. Your servant will never again offer entirely burned offerings or sacrifices to any other gods except the Lord. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. When my master comes into Rimmon's temple to bow down there and is leaning on my arm, I must also bow down in Rimmon's temple. When I bow down in Rimmon's temple, may the Lord forgive your servant for doing that." Elisha said to him, "Go in peace." First, in this story, we're introduced to Naaman, a general for the country of Aram. Now, currently, that country is called Syria. Known for his prowess in battle and his physical presence, Naaman is facing a degrading disease that could erode his status. This is a skin disease that is beginning to cause disfigurement of Naaman. Some translate the skin disease as leprosy. Others describe it as a type of psoriasis. But Naaman has a servant girl who serves his wife. She's an Israelite captive. She was taken in battle as a young girl and forced into servitude. But her strong faith and courage lead her to feeling compassion for Naaman, and it results in her suggestion to Naaman's wife to have him seek out an Israeli prophet who's been able to cure people. A third character in our story today is the king of Aram, who actually encouraged his general to find the prophet and was willing to make a formal request to Israel's king to set the plan in motion. The king of Israel was skeptical of this entire situation and was afraid that this was just some kind of crazy plan to destroy him and to make him go into battle. And then there's Elisha, the prophet. He heard of the letter that had been sent to his king, and he tried to ease the mind of the king of Israel. He suggested that the meeting really should be encouraged. Well, think about this cast of characters. Some of them come from the highest social ranks, and others were in the serving class. Because, there was another group, a group of servants that had attended Naaman on his journey, and they were brave enough to question their own general and encouraged him to do as Elisha had said. As we look at all these various interactions, let's be aware that God inspires and empowers people who are willing to help others, who are willing to help these people find the peace and the joy that only God can bestow. Naaman had proven his worth to the kingdom of Aram and to his king. But this mighty warrior was concerned about his personal health. His skin disease could lead to adverse circumstances of his appearance and could cause others to disrespect him. And there could also have been a fear of further physical deterioration that would have inhibited his performance as a warrior. But a young Israeli servant girl confided to Naaman's wife that a prophet in Samaria could possibly heal Naaman and cure the disease. Naaman was concerned about his condition enough to where he apparently had no confidence in local religious officials or others who professed to be healers. So he went to his king with the information his wife's servant girl had shared. The king valued Naaman's service and volunteered to send a letter to Israel's king, describing the circumstance and requesting the king's assistance for his general. Then he sent Naaman to the king of Israel with a letter asking him for a cure. I assume that the king figured that if just a lowly prophet in Israel could cure, then surely the king of Israel could. Well, Naaman also took silver and gold and articles of clothing to pay for the king's service. The king of Israel, however, believed that the entire proceeding was a trick and that his inability to cure would spell doom for his country. But when Elijah heard that his king thought the request of the Aram king was a pretext or an incentive for them to invade Israel, Elijah said, "Just send the man to me. He needs to know that I am a prophet of God, and I will do what needs to be done to serve God and save Israel." When the king directed Naaman and his men to Elijah's house, Elijah did not even come out to meet him. He just sent out a messenger telling Naaman to go and wash 7 times in the Jordan River to cure his disease. Naaman was offended by what he perceived to be a slight. He implied that there were cleaner rivers in his own country, and if merely washing 7 times would cure him, he could have stayed at home, and he began to gather his men to return to Aram. Naaman's servants, however, questioned this impulsive response, asking whether a more extreme solution to a cure would have been better accepted. Why not at least try this simple task, to wash in the Jordan and become clean? What do you have to lose? So Naaman accepted their advice, bathed in the Jordan 7 times, and his skin was restored and clean. He then went back to Elisha with the realization that Elisha's God was the one true God, and he asked Elisha to accept a gift for his service. Elisha, of course, refused the gift and then refused it a second time. Naaman then made another request. He asked for 2 mule loads of earth to carry back to his home, vowing he never again would offer burned offerings or sacrifices to any other god than the God of Israel. It was clear that Naaman believed that the land of Israel was sacred land, and he wanted to have this load of dirt so he could remain close to the land where God's presence was most honored. Naaman then made a second request of Elisha, a plea for future forgiveness. He knew that as he returned to Aram, he would be required to accompany his king when offering sacrifices to Rimmon, the harvest god and god of storm and rain. He felt conflicted about fulfilling his duties to his king, and he now thought that paying homage to a false god was merely going through the motions of worship. He therefore asked Elisha if he could be forgiven for accompanying his king in what he had discovered to be merely a ceremonial act. Elisha seemed to grant his request as he told him to go in peace. We assume that this meant that Naaman would carry in his heart the love and peace that only a caring and forgiving God could provide. We don't have a further record of Naaman's actions beyond this event, but we would like to think that his appreciation for people whom he may have previously considered socially inferior had grown. And a servant girl, a prophet, a prophet that he had considered to be common or crass, and even the subordinates who had accompanied him on his journey, all had led to his acceptance of Yahweh as the one true God. His desire to remain faithful to God was symbolically shown with the soil of Israel that he carried back to Aram with him. More importantly, he became a more humble and forgiving person because he had allowed his heart to be warmed by God's love. Let's pray together. Dear God, help us reflect the light of your love by our actions and by our interactions with people who differ from us in their faith, their nationality, or their family backgrounds or environments. Amen.